Okay, hi folks. I'm going to do some texture painting in Blender Render. So we're going to model a simple tree, more simple than this one, and I'll go through some of the basic settings within the texture paint mode, and we're going to give it a bit of a bash, and then we can go ahead and use some of these techniques with our character. Okay, so we're going to start with a new file. I'll just turn on the screencast keys so you can see most of the hotkeys I'm pressing. So we're going to delete this cube and just add in a low poly cylinder. So I'll just F6 and turn the vertex down to 8. We're just going to go into orthographic view. I prefer orthographic view for modelling. We don't get strange distortions caused by the perspective. Okay, we're just going to take that top face up on the Z-axis and scale it in a little bit. We'll just make one branch. I might just flare out the base of the trunk a little bit, and then we'll make one branch here as quickly as we can. So I wanted to show you one tip here, so I'm just going to right orthographic view. We'll extrude this branch from the side. If we select that vert and double tap the G key, we can move that vert up on the edge that it's attached to. So rather than rather than moving it straight up on the Z-axis, which again can cause distortions, you can ensure that that vert stays adjacent to the edge. We'll just scale this in. We might rotate it out on the Y-axis a little bit, so we're going to extrude this branch away from the main trunk. Add another loop cut here, and let's just do the same thing with the base of this extrusion. And double tap G. Okay, we'll just extrude this guy out. Scale him in. Just line that up a little bit. Okay, so another tip. We're going to add our clumps of leaves here. So we want to add them accurately at this point, so we can make sure our 3D cursor is set to the selected object. Come back to Object View. We'll add this as a separate mesh object, Shift A. And we're going to create these clumps with a cube and a subsurf. So we just add the subdivision surface modifier, and then a little loop cut which we'll take down to the base. Let's scale that out a little bit. That's a bit more like it. And let's just do the same thing over here. We could just duplicate that guy and move him around. It wouldn't be that difficult, but this is a handy thing to improve that process. Improve the efficiency of that process. Okay, so we've got a nice big clump at the top. Okay, I'm actually going to apply these modifiers. So at the moment, this is the geometry that actually exists, and this is being created on the fly by the modifier, a little bit like an adjustment layer. It's a kind of non-destructive way of adding geometry. However, because we're going to unwrap these and we want more accurate unwrapping, we're going to apply the modifier so that we now get our mesh. Okay, so we've now got to quickly add in some materials. So we're adding material for each of the objects, and we should really be naming these, but just for speed we'll not bother. We are going to turn down the specular intensity of these materials. So you can see if I turn the specular up, we get a shinier surface. If we turn it down, we get a matte surface. We don't want plastic tree trunks. So new, turn the intensity down. So we've got 3 separate materials. We're going to create 3 separate textures as quickly as we can. Okay, so let's split the window in half. Get rid of this menu here. I'm going to change this window to the UV image editor. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a new image. And this is going to be the image we're going to use to texture the trunk. So we want to set up a new texture with a kind of base colour, a kind of neutral brown. And we can name this one trunk. And looking at my trunk, it could do with being a little bit thinner at the top. It's not great. Oh well, that'll do. Okay, right, so we've got a new image here. So we've got a new image, we've got our material, we've got a new image. At the moment, Blender doesn't know that this texture needs to be applied to this material, so in the Texture tab, we'll click New, and then from the Image drop down we'll select that trunk image. So this is why naming textures is important, because we're going to be selecting them from a drop down menu. We need to know which ones are which. Okay, so we're going to unwrap. So this tree needs to be unwrapped. We need to unwrap the UVs. So if we hit U and just select unwrap, we got all our UVs here in the image editor. However, they're all stacked on top of each other, so we've got no control of where the paint's going to be applied. So we could cut seams if we wanted to be very accurate about this. We could cut a seam around and separate out this branch from the trunk. But we're going to be painting mainly in this view, in the 3D view. We'll be 3D texture painting. We might do a little bit of 2D on this side, but we're going to be mostly painting in the 3D view. So it's not essential that the UVs are 100% perfect. We can't have any overlaps, but we might be able to get away with this Smart UV Project objects option. So we'll select that and see what happens. At this point, we can decide on an island margin. So this just creates gaps between the UVs when they are unwrapped. And there's our UVs added to our new image, and they look pretty decent. So we can nip into texture paint mode now, and we can start looking at some of these settings that we have appearing on the left now. What I might do actually is work in smooth shading. This is just a kind of personal preference, a style choice. Next texture paint mode. I'm really not happy with the shape of this tree trunk, but let's try not to fixate on that too much. Right, so in the toolbar here in texture paint mode, we have some brushes to choose from. So we've got the default texture draw brush, it's just a standard brush. We have fill brush. We're going to be using the fill brush, the standard painting brush. We might do a bit of smearing, a bit of softening. The fill brush will let us fill this object with a particular colour. So if you wanted to choose a green, or any colour, with the fill brush selected, one click, and it will fill that object with the colour at 50% strength, because we have a setting here at our strength setting here at 0.5. If we turn this right up, choose another colour, we'll get 100% of this colour applied to our trunk. So that's the fill brush. That can be quite handy. You might notice that we're getting some little gaps here, and I think that's down to the bleed on the UV. So you can see that the paint is not really spreading past the edge of the UVs, so every now and again we're going to be getting little gaps. So we can just change that quickly here in the options. We have a bleed option. I'm going to turn that up to 8. And let me just check if that's going to help. So let's go back to our neutral-ish brown. And that's a bit more like it. Okay. Right. What we want to do is start building up a little palette of colours. So we're going to have a light, a mid and a dark tone. So we're actually going to create a new palette here. This is the new palette option, so we'll just click that. And we can add to the palette with this plus icon. I'm not keen on this brown. I think the one that I started off with was a little bit better. So we can use the eyedropper here just by clicking on the foreground colour option, choosing the eyedrop, select that brown here. I'm going to add it to the palette, and then I'm just going to use the fill tool to drop that brown back in again. Okay, so let's make a darker tone. So we'll just drag this value shift slider, add a dark tone. We'll just take it back this direction, and add a light tone, maybe a little bit lighter than that. So get rid of that one and add a new one. Okay, so we've got a mid-dark and highlight or light tone. Right, so let's go back to our standard texture draw brush. So you can see the brush head here. We can change the size of the brush with this radius setting, and we can change the strength of the brush with this strength slider here. We've got hotkeys for these, so F will adjust the size of the brush, and Shift F will adjust the strength. Okay, so we've got completely transparent to 50% sort of opacity, 100% opacity. Okay, so we're going to start off around about here. And right, so let's paint on some kind of fake occlusion shadows just underneath these clumps. We need to choose our dark tone for this. Okay, so we're just gently painting on some shadows here. And let's have a look behind this tree. So we have to remember we're working in 3 dimensions, and what's happened is it's painted it on the surface that's pointing towards the camera, but however the surfaces away from the camera are not having any paint applied. And that's down to these settings here, the project paint settings. I'll go through the 3 very quickly, but I normally just switch them all off if I want to paint through the mesh and keep them on if I don't. With them switched on, you can get some kind of you can get some fairly jagged results. Let me just turn the strength up so you can see what's happening here. So if I paint on here with those settings, you can see that they're, you can get some nasty jaggedy areas, which we can tidy up with we can blend these things together later. But it's quite nice to be able to paint through the entire mesh. So the occlude option essentially allows you to only paint on faces that are directly below the mouse. Cull will block us from painting on the back of the faces, and the normal setting will limit what we can paint on by the angle of the normals, by the angle of by the way the direction the face is pointing essentially. But as I say, I would normally just switch these all off. So we'll switch them all off and add our shadow back in and see what happens. So add a shadow on the top, and you can see it's painting right across the whole mesh. So let's add another little shadow here. And let's have a look at this setting here. So at the moment we're just applying paint to the mesh object. We can be selective with what parts of the mesh we apply them with this masking setting here. So face selection masking for painting. If we switch that on, we can then select various parts of the mesh. Just right clicking here. We can use circle select, or we can use box select. So let's add a separate colour here. Let's add a sort of greeny moss. And notice I'm choosing my colours from this kind of middle area. We really want to be working with fairly desaturated colours rather than these kind of zinging saturated colours out towards the edge of the colour wheel. So nice desaturated green. Let's add that to the palette. Let's chuck this on at 100% strength just so you can see it happening. So paint that on. And if we switch this off, you can see that we've added paint only to those selected faces. Now, that might not be exactly what I'm wanting here, but I just wanted to demonstrate that option. Right. Now then, let's have a look at some brush strokes. I don't want to kind of take too long over this process, but I thought we could try and add some impressions of bark to this tree. So we've got our texture draw brush. If we have a look at some of the stroke settings here, we can switch on smooth stroke, which is a really handy thing to do. And then we'll just go back to our palette, and we'll give ourselves a nice small brush, and then we'll see what happens with the smooth stroke setting. So I'll choose a light tone, and then we'll left click and drag, and you can see that we get these nice curvy lines, nice smooth stroke. With that switched off, it's a lot harder to, especially with a mouse anyway, it's a lot harder to get a nice flowing line. It's not a huge difference, but it is pretty handy. So we'll turn on the smooth stroke option. We want kind of slightly thinner lines. And this bit here, I don't want to be taking too long over it, because I don't want this video to be going on for ages. And this might be a time where you want to switch to your 2D painting option over here in the image editor. To do that, we can switch from view in the image editor to paint, and then we can use exactly the same settings we have here over on this side. So let's just add in a few lines. I think I've got my mid-tone selected. Let's choose the dark one. Now it's going to look pretty horrible to begin with. We're going to kind of blend this stuff together later on. I'm not going to go crazy here. I'm just going to show you the basic premise, the basic idea of what I'm doing. And you can spend a bit more time making it look good. I might speed this part up. I'm not sure I can be bothered going through the whole process just now. I just want to show you, as I say, show you the basic idea. Now we might switch to the 3D model just to make sure we're getting a fairly uniform result. But you can see that smooth curve option is really working well here. Now it looks mental at the moment, but it hopefully will look a bit better once we start blending this stuff together. Right, that'll do for the time being. So at this point I'm going to switch to the smear tool. And we're going to turn the strength up a fair bit on the smear tool. We want a fairly big brush. And we're just going to try and... oh, this is where it's going to get a bit laggy. And we can do this in the image editor as well. So, like I said, I'm not going to spend too long making this perfect because I don't want you to get more bored than you already are. Okay. So that's passable for the time being. You get the idea of the technique. You want to spend a little bit more time over it, but you get the idea. That's looking all right, actually. Now, one thing that, if you've gone too far, your contrast is too high, this fill brush is quite helpful in kind of adding in a kind of wash of tone over the top of everything. So if we select that kind of mid-tone and we turn the strength down fairly low, we can click on our tree, and as you see, it's kind of adding in a wash of that mid-tone across everything, so that if it's too harsh, we can kind of turn down the contrast a little bit just by washing over a mid-tone. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. I might just very quickly add in our shadows again, because we've kind of painted over the tops of our shadows, and then I'll very quickly add in. We don't want to use this. That's alright. I'm going to turn off this smooth stroke option for these V shadows. Okay, so we've got some ambient occlusion. Might add one across the top here, across the bottom here, the shadow. Fine, right. So, very, very important, you must save this image. If we close this down at this point, if we save Blender at this point, and come back to the file, this will be gone. And it has happened to me before a couple of times, and it is massively annoying. So make sure you save as image. I've already got some files in here, so yeah, trunk's fine. I'll just save as trunk. So now we've got no star against the little image menu here. We know that this has been saved as trunk. So we'll very quickly go back to Object View and add some textures to these clumps. So I'm just going to get rid of this texture. and create a new one. And this one's going to be called Clump, and I'll change the base colour now to a green. And then same thing again, make sure we've got the texture applied to that material. So new, and we'll choose Clump 1. And we'll just very quickly unwrap this guy. So Smart UV Project again with our island margin. And then we just need to make sure we select it back here. And we've got our green. So we're just going to, again, you can spend more time over this. I'm just going to add a very quick, have I got the shine down on that? Yeah. I'm just going to add a bit of a highlight to the top, just a rough highlight. Oh, the reason it looks bad is because I haven't turned on smooth shading. I'm just going to add a quick highlight to the top of this. Now we could use local view. I can either hit the / on the numpad here and go into local view, or we could just paint onto the UV here. So we're just going to add a bit of a highlight. So we'll choose that green, choose a light tone, add it to our palette, turn the strength down a bit, nice big brush. And so again, we're kind of faking the lighting here. Why is that not painting on here? Run texture paint mode. We've got Clump 1 here, we've got Clump 1 here. What's happened? What have I done? Something's wrong. Oh, it's maybe just not strong enough. Yeah, just wasn't. Is it working? Does not seem to be working. Right, what has happened here? This is annoying. It does look like it's doing something. It's maybe just not a light enough tone, so let me lighten that up again. A bit further. Right, there we go. So it wasn't light enough. It's always great when we get where I look like an idiot whilst making a daft video which is meant to make me look smart. Okay, that's not the reason I'm doing these. Right, so we could paint on a bit of a shadow on the underside here. I just thought I'd show you the process. Right, do it again very quickly for the top. So back here to in object view. Make sure we save this image. So every texture that we have, you must save. So we'll save as image, Clump 1. I think I've already got. No, I'm alright. Clump 1, save as image, and then we'll get rid of that one. And we're not getting rid of it by clicking the X there. It's still here in our drop down. We're just it's not the most intuitive part of Blender's interface. Okay, so we'll call this top. We're not actually deleting it by Xing it out here. Okay, so make sure we've applied it in the texture menu here also. So top, into texture, paint mode, and turn on smooth shading. Into texture paint mode, and then again very quickly we're just going to chuck on our light tone after we have unwrapped it, of course. Okay, Smart UV Project. Make sure we select our top. Okay, now texture paint. Get our light tone, and we'll just bang on a little bit of light. And as I say, you can go crazy here. There's lots of things you could play with. We could play with the jitter on this brush, for example, and maybe add a little bit of texture in this sort of fashion. We can create texture brushes here, so you can add in a mask. We're not going to do anything like that just now. There are plenty other resources you can look at for getting more advanced results. But the jitter option is quite nice for adding a little bit of variation to your surfaces. It's a bit much. But we'll leave it there for now, just to show you that it's there. We can adjust the spacing and the size and so on of these jittered blotches with these settings here. So that's quite a nice thing to try out. Right, so let's see how this guy's looking now. So we go back to object view, and if we check this in material shading, we're going to have to get rid of this point lamp. So let's turn this into a Hemi. Let's see how that's looking. So that's not looking too bad. Is there anything else I need to discuss? We want to be looking at adding colour palettes, looking at different brushes, adjusting the bleed settings, masking out different faces so we can paint on particular areas of the mesh, making sure you've got separate materials on each of the objects in your design, and therefore separate textures against each of those objects, and then you should be good to go. So we will have a look at how we can apply some of these techniques to our characters in lesson perhaps, but that should get you started with some of the basic techniques of texture painting. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.